Like most founders, I used to think that growing a startup meant working on dozens of things at the same time. Then I discovered a radical new way of working that completely changed how we work, that has allowed our 3-person team to build products now used by millions of people. So in this video, I'll show you our exact 5-step framework that will help you identify the right 20% of work that drives 80% of your growth, so you can stop wasting time on everything else. Let's dive in. Hi there, if you're new to this channel, my name is Ash Maurya. I'm an entrepreneur and author and the creator of the one-page business modeling tool, Lean Canvas, used by millions of founders around the world. On this channel, I share systematic strategies and techniques for launching and growing a startup. So this 5-step framework I mentioned earlier isn't something we created overnight. It was born out of frustration and many painful lessons, including one particular moment that completely changed how we approach product development. Let me take you back to that turning point. A few years ago, I found myself, coffee in hand, reviewing our weekly product metrics as I always do on Monday mornings. It was almost 4 months since we had launched our Lean Canvas product, and there it was again. I had been tracking a disturbing trend for the 4th week in a row where our activation rate had been progressively dropping. Activation is a critical milestone metric, especially for a new product, because it serves as a leading indicator for future engagement. In other words, activated users are far more likely to come back and use a product than non-activated users. For our product, we had identified activation as a user completing their first Lean Canvas on the platform. We knew that users who completed their Lean Canvases in the first week were highly likely to keep using the product, and those that didn't almost never came back. This metric had started off very healthy at an 80% activation rate, but was currently hovering at just under 35%. This meant that for every 100 people that we signed up, 65 of them would likely never come back. What was even more concerning is that we had been aware of this issue for weeks now and hadn't been sitting idle. During the last 4 weeks, I had asked my designer to implement several usability enhancements in our activation flow at the specific steps where we were seeing the biggest drop-offs. But none of these enhancements seemed to be making any difference, and things were still getting worse. As I sat there staring at my metrics dashboard, I felt like Bill Murray in the movie Groundhog Day, where he is forced to relive the same day over and over in a loop until he makes a breakthrough revelation. I had been searching for this breakthrough with my designer, but nothing we tried seemed to be working. In the spirit of efficiency, the rest of the team were working on other initiatives. I was primarily focused on driving new user acquisition or signups. Our 2 developers were building out new tools to complement the Lean Canvas product, and our 1 designer split his time across both these initiatives. While we were certainly keeping ourselves busy on many different fronts, I realized then that we had to fix this activation issue, because even if we managed to sign up more users, we would end up losing 65% of them just after the first week. And even if we built more advanced tools, 65% of our users would never even get to them. Activation had become the key bottleneck or constraint in the business model. And so I called a team meeting and made a case for the entire team to focus on addressing this activation issue. The team, after a little convincing, saw the logic in my argument, but asked me a more practical question. How do we prioritize all our other initiatives? We couldn't drop the ball on everything else, and so we agreed to implement a new policy where we would focus 80% of our attention on identifying and breaking key constraints and 20% on all other work. That was the easy part, but the discussion then turned to possible solutions for breaking our activation rate constraint, and the next thing you know, 2 hours flew by just like that. We had put a lot of ideas on the whiteboard and were starting to go around in circles where everyone was trying to convince each other on the merits of their idea, but we couldn't all agree on any one clear winning idea. As I scanned the ideas on the board, I couldn't help but notice that the developers in the room had proposed building more features and improving product performance. Our designer had proposed trying out even more usability and UX fixes, and the marketer on the team, me, wanted to run more content and awareness campaigns because I thought we were attracting the wrong users. It dawned on me then that we were all pitching what we all knew best, but not everyone in the room saw things the same way because we were all good at different things. I now call this the Curse of Specialization. On the one hand, you want a room full of specialists or domain experts, so that you can come up with a diversity of different ideas, but this leads to the next problem. How do you pick the best idea? We had a dozen ideas on the whiteboard, but could only work on one or two of them at a time given our resources, and we couldn't agree on which one or two to prioritize first. And that's when I had my aha moment. As I reflected back on how we were pitching our ideas, I realized that we had all been trying to convince each other on the merits of our proposed solution, but what if we flip this around and instead focused on the merits of the underlying problem? We all understood the high-level problem here, that people weren't completing a lean canvas, and we all had different theories on why, but we didn't have any real evidence other than our opinions that justified our theories. So I told the others, what if we took a week just to gather evidence that supported our proposed solutions, and then came back and pitched our ideas again? We met a week later, and the list of ideas had already shrunk from a dozen to just 3 proposals. Unlike before, instead of just pitching their solution, everyone was required to first provide supporting evidence for the problem they had uncovered, and then demonstrate how their proposed solution fits to solve that problem. 10 minutes later, we had our winning proposal. We had all picked the blank canvas proposal submitted by our designer. He had spent the last several days conducting usability tests with new users, and after just 7 tests, he noticed that almost everyone hesitated when filling out a lean canvas. When he asked them why, most of them said it was because they didn't know how to fill it or in what order to fill it, and asked if there was some kind of a guide or example canvas that they could reference. So sure, more testing would still be needed, but this was a key insight that allowed us to come up with the following theory. The reason our activation rate had been much higher immediately after launch was that those users were early adopters. They were already familiar with the Lean Canvas, either through my blog, workshops, and book, Running Lean. They didn't need additional help to fill out a Lean Canvas, but over time, as our user base had been broadening, this new segment of users didn't have this prior knowledge. They were staring at a blank canvas with writer's block. Once we had a plausible explanation of the problem backed by some supporting evidence, the solution was obvious and simple. We needed a way to guide new users through their first Lean Canvas using some kind of a guide or help content. We started discussing several ideas that ranged from simple fixes like adding tooltips to the tool to building a completely new onboarding experience that would take weeks to build. To avoid going down another build rabbit hole, I suggested that we embrace a 2-week time box constraint to test this theory. In other words, whatever we pick needs to be buildable and testable in 2 weeks. If we can prove it works, we can then invest more in improving it further. Otherwise, we cut our losses with this campaign and pick a different idea. It didn't take us long for us to settle on creating a single helper video using slides and content from my workshops to guide new users through their first canvas. Within just a couple of days, the video was ready, and to ensure that all new users saw it, we displayed it prominently as a pop-up on the Lean Canvas screen immediately after people signed up. At the end of 2 weeks, we got together again to review the results. And there was a measurable and significant improvement in activation, along with lots of good engagement and comments from new users who watched the video. This single 2-week experiment had succeeded in moving the needle, and early signals were strong to support doubling down on this campaign. The activation problem, as we learned, was not caused by bad UX or missing features, but a lack of how-to content. And so that's exactly what we did. We invested in more video content over time and even started building full-on courses that taught new users how to best use these tools, which we continue to refine and optimize to this day. So that's how we stumbled into this new way of working, which we turned into a 5-step framework that I'll outline in the next section. Step 1, identify your key constraint. At any point in time, there is always a single bottleneck or constraint that holds your business model back. This is the one domino that, when tipped, stands to have the biggest impact in your business, like the activation rate in my example. Your job is to identify that constraint and ignore everything else. And that leads us to step 2, align your entire team around breaking this one constraint. Instead of having each team member focus on their specialty area, have them instead focus 80% of their attention on breaking this key constraint and 20% on all other work. The magic here comes from sourcing a good diversity of ideas. Good ideas can come from anywhere, and the best way to find a winning idea is to come up with lots of ideas. If you're a solo founder or don't have a core team, surround yourself with other advisors who can help with idea generation. Then, to avoid drowning in too many ideas, implement step number 3. Prioritize your most promising ideas based on problem evidence strength. This is a crucial step to avoid falling in love with shiny objects and elegant solutions, and instead get a little outside of your comfort zone and understand what's really happening with customers. As you saw in my story, a problem well understood is half solved. That said, it still needs to be tested, which leads us to step 4, make bets on your most promising proposals. Pick your 1 or 2 most promising ideas and devise a 2-week experiment to test these ideas, prioritizing the riskiest assumptions first. 2 weeks might not seem like a lot of time, but when you prioritize testing what's riskiest in the theory, you'll find that you can test almost any big idea by breaking it down into several small and additive 2-week experiments. If an experiment moves the needle, double down on it. Otherwise, consider pivoting to the next most promising idea on your list. And finally, step number 5, rinse and repeat. As you start solving problems and breaking some of your business model constraints, the bottleneck or constraint will shift to another part of your business model. And that's your cue to find the next constraint and repeat steps 1 to 4. This is how you continuously prioritize working on the most impactful work, leverage your team's strengths, and get more done with less busy work. Now, to implement this framework well, you'll need a reliable way to identify your key business model constraint or bottleneck, because if you get that wrong, then you're again chasing down the wrong rabbit hole after suboptimal problems. If you'd like to learn how to systematically identify the right constraint in your business model, you should check out this video over here. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.